The colony rested on the edge of a wide plain where the tall silver grass bent under the wind of two suns. It was a place built on patience and hope. Humans had come here many years ago to find a home, and aliens had come too, drawn by trade and survival. Both groups tried to share the land, yet trust was a fragile thing. The Council of Leaders often worried about conflict. To avoid trouble, they arranged an unusual solution: a marriage between two different people, one human and one alien. The names of those chosen spread quickly across the colony. The human was a farmer named Aran, known for his quiet nature and steady work. He was not a soldier or a man of fame. He was simple, but he carried himself with calm strength. The alien bride was Nira, daughter of a respected warrior line. Her people valued courage, honor, and power. She was tall, strong, and carried a pride that few dared to challenge. When the announcement was made, whispers moved through the settlement. Some said it would never work. Some believed peace was only possible through trade or walls, not through love. Others laughed, calling it a desperate trick by the council. The day of the union arrived. The ceremony was held in the hall at the center of the colony, where banners of both peoples hung side by side. Humans stood in neat rows, while Nira's people stood taller, their armor gleaming though no weapons were allowed inside. Aaron wore simple white cloth, the kind worn at important moments in human tradition. Nira wore dark fabric that flowed behind her, the sign of her warrior bloodline. The council leader raised a hand for silence. He spoke of peace, of a future where human and alien would live as one. Then he turned to the bride and groom. Aaron stepped forward first. His words were few, spoken with steady voice. He said he accepted the bond, not for power, but for unity. Nira's reply was slower. She spoke as if each word carried weight. She accepted too, though her eyes held no warmth. The hall filled with the sound of voices chanting together, humans and aliens repeating the old words of binding. When the voices faded, the two were declared husband and wife. The colony cheered, but in the hearts of many, doubt still remained. After the ceremony, Aaron led Nira to his home near the edge of the fields. It was a modest house, built from pale, stone and wood brought from the forests. Vines grew along one wall, and the air smelled of soil and harvest. Inside, the rooms were simple: a table, 2 chairs, shelves with tools, and a small fire pit for cooking. Nira stepped inside, her sharp eyes moving over everything. She was used to large halls and strong walls, not such humble space. Aaron offered her water, but she only nodded and stood near the window, staring out at the plains. Silence stretched between them. It was not the silence of peace, but of distance. They were strangers forced together. That night they ate bread and dried fruit. Aaron spoke of the harvest season, of storms that sometimes rolled across the plains. His words were calm, but Nira gave short replies, never asking questions. When the meal ended, she left the table and stood outside under the stars. Aaron watched her from the doorway but said nothing. He understood that trust could not be built in one day. Days turned to weeks. Aaron woke early each morning to tend the fields. He worked with quiet focus, repairing fences and machines. Sometimes Nira watched from a distance, her arms crossed. She thought humans weak, yet Aaron never complained even when lifting heavy beams or digging deep into the hard earth. His back bent with labor, but his eyes never lost their calm. In the evenings, he returned to cook meals. He always set a portion for Nira, though she often ate alone. Still, she noticed his small habits. He cleaned the tools before resting. He fixed broken hinges without being asked. He spoke little, yet his actions filled the silence with meaning. The colony watched from afar. Some expected anger between the two, Others expected separation. Yet there was no fighting, only quiet distance. The whispers continued. Many believed Nira would never accept her human husband. One evening, rain swept across the plains. The storm was fierce, with winds that shook the house and water that poured through the roof. Aaron climbed up despite the storm, holding heavy stones to cover weak spots. Nira stood below, watching him move carefully on the slippery roof. Lightning flashed, and the wind nearly pushed him down, but he held steady until the task was done. When he returned, soaked and tired, she finally spoke more than a single word. She asked why he risked himself for such a small home. He answered simply, "A house must be cared for if people are to live in it." His voice held no pride, only truth. That night, Nira sat by the fire longer than usual. She said nothing more, but her eyes no longer carried only coldness. The weeks that followed were quiet, yet something subtle began to change. Nira still kept her distance, yet she no longer looked at Aaron with doubt alone. She began to see patience where she once saw weakness. She began to see strength in silence. The union remained fragile, like a bridge built over rushing water. But it stood. Neither Aaron nor Nira had chosen this path, yet now they walked it together step by step. The colony still whispered, but within the small stone house on the edge of the plains, a story had begun. A story that neither of them could yet understand. The silver plains stretched endlessly, touched by the light of two suns. The days were long, and the nights were filled with the sound of insects humming in the grass. In the middle of this quiet world, a house of pale stone stood with two people, living inside it. One was human, one was alien, joined not by choice, but by duty. Aaron lived as he always had, rising before the suns appeared and working with his hands. His life was simple, built around tools, soil, and patience. Nira, his alien bride, lived with him now, yet she seemed like a shadow in the home. She rarely spoke, and when she did, her words were short and careful. She was not unkind, but her distance was sharp, as if an invisible wall stood between them. Nira came from warriors. Her people had always solved conflict with strength. To her, humans were fragile, too quick to grow tired, too quick to break. She had seen Aaron's people trade, plant crops, and build small machines. They survived, but in her eyes, they were not strong. She had agreed to the union because her council demanded it, not because her heart had accepted it. The colony around them continued to whisper. Some believed Nira would never soften. Others thought Aaron's patience would break under the weight of her silence. Children sometimes stared when the two walked through the market. They saw the height of Nira's figure and the quiet stride of Aaron beside her, and they whispered stories about the strange pair. One morning, Aaron carried a broken plow out of the shed. The blade had split during the last harvest, and it needed repair. He set the heavy iron on the ground and began hammering it into shape. The sun climbed higher and sweat covered his face, but his hands never stopped. Nira stood near the doorway, watching. She did not offer help. In her mind, this task would have been easy for one of her kind. She expected Aaron to falter, yet the hours passed, and he kept going, steady as the rhythm of the earth. When he finished, he lifted the plow alone and set it back in place. That evening, she asked him a question for the first time in many days. She asked why he did not call for others to help. He answered simply that it was his duty to repair what belonged to him. His words were plain, but they held a weight that surprised her. The days that followed carried more small moments like this. Once, when a water pipe broke under the field, Aaron climbed into the mud and worked until his arms were covered in dirt. Nira saw him pull stone after stone, pushing through the weight without a single complaint. Another time, when a roof beam cracked in the market, he joined 3 others to lift it back into place. He did not seek praise, and when the work was done, he returned home quietly. Nira began to see something she had not expected. Strength was not only in muscle or battle, it was in persistence, in a will that did not bend when the body grew tired. She did not say this aloud, but she carried the thought with her. One evening, rain poured again over the plains. The roof of their house shook with the storm, and the fire inside burned low. Aaron sat at the table, fixing a small tool, while Nira stood by the window. She asked him why he never grew angry at her silence. He looked up for a moment, then answered. That anger could not build trust. He said he would wait as long as it took, for a bond forced quickly would never last. His words struck her more deeply than she expected. She had always believed strength meant striking first, never waiting, never showing weakness. Yet here was a man who showed no anger, no rush, and still seemed unshaken. The next morning, Nira joined him in the fields. She did not speak, but she helped carry baskets of grain. The settlers nearby noticed. They whispered again, but this time their whispers were softer, filled with curiosity instead of doubt. The distance between Aaron and Nira did not vanish overnight. Many evenings were still quiet, many meals still passed in silence. Yet each day carried a small change. Nira began to ask about the work in the fields. She asked why humans planted in certain patterns, why they used water channels instead of letting the rain fall freely. Aaron explained with patience, telling her how humans survived by planning, by working with nature instead of against it. She listened, though she did not always agree. Her people took what they needed by force. The idea of bending to the rhythm of soil and sky was strange to her. Still, she could not deny that the fields gave food, and the colony stood because of such methods. One night, as the stars filled the sky, Nira stepped outside and looked across the plains. She remembered her own people's homeworld, filled with mountains and stone halls. She thought of the life she had expected, filled with battles and honors. Instead, she now stood beside a quiet house with a human who lived by soil and patience. She felt the old pride in her chest, the pride that told her humans were lesser. But beside it, a new feeling stirred. A question. Could it be that strength was not only in warriors but also in those who built and endured? Aaron stepped outside then, standing beside her without a word. They both looked at the same stars, and for the first time, the silence between them felt less like a wall and more like a bridge not yet finished. The days went on, and though the colony still doubted, Aaron and Nira began to change in ways no one could see from outside. She was still proud, and he was still quiet, yet something fragile was forming between them. The union had not been born of love, but perhaps love was not the only beginning. Sometimes trust grew first, like the roots of a tree hidden deep under the earth. And in the house of pale stone, under the endless skies of the plains, the roots of something greater had begun to spread. The days of the colony moved with quiet rhythm. Farmers tended fields, traders sold goods, and guards walked along the low walls. Yet under this calm surface, unease began to spread. It started with whispers from travelers who came across the border. They spoke of ships moving in the darkness of space, ships with no banners and no clear purpose. Some said they were raiders, others said they were scouts from a forgotten empire. No one knew the truth, but fear grew like weeds in the minds of the settlers. Aaron continued his work in the fields. He repaired fences, cared for the crops, and prepared tools for the next season. Nira remained near him, sometimes helping, sometimes watching in silence. She, too, had heard the whispers. Her people were warriors, and she understood the weight of such rumors. Raiders did not move without reason. If they were close, then danger was already near. One evening, the council gathered. In the main hall, both humans and Nira's people attended. The leaders spoke of reports from watchtowers at the edge of the plains. Strange lights had been seen in the night sky, moving in patterns that no star or storm could make. The colony had few defenses. A wall of stone, a handful of guards, and a few weapons were all that stood between them and an attack. The council urged calm, but worry filled every face. Aaron sat quietly at the back of the hall, listening. He was not a soldier, but he understood the fear of those around him. The colony had worked hard to survive, and now their peace seemed fragile. Nira stood near the front, her arms crossed, her eyes sharp. She spoke when the council paused. She said that her people were ready to fight, that they would not let raiders take their home. Her voice was strong, but Aaron noticed something beneath it, a shadow of uncertainty. That night, as they walked back to their house, Nira spoke more than usual. She told Aaron about battles from her past, about how raiders once attacked her people's outposts on another world. She described their speed and cruelty. She said humans might not be ready for such enemies. Aaron listened, his steps steady on the dirt road. He finally answered that running or hiding would not save them. The colony had to stand together. The next morning, volunteers were called to scout the borderlands. Few stepped forward, for many were afraid. To Nira's surprise, Aaron raised his hand. She turned to him, her eyes wide. He was not trained for battle, yet he offered himself. She asked him later why he did it. He said simply that someone had to go, and he could not ask others to take risks he would not take himself. His words stirred something deep inside her. The scouting party left at dawn. They carried small packs, light weapons, and signal flares. Aaron walked with them, his face calm, though his heart beat hard. The plains stretched before them, endless silver under the rising suns. Nira watched from the wall, her chest tight with unease. For the first time since the marriage, she felt fear for her human husband. The journey across the plains was long and silent. The scouts moved carefully, scanning the skies and the horizon. Hours passed, and nothing stirred except the wind. Then, as the second sun began to set, one of the scouts pointed upward. Dark shapes moved across the sky. At first, they seemed like clouds, but they shifted too quickly, their edges sharp against the fading light. The shapes grew larger until the scouts could see the glow of engines, ships. Aaron felt his throat tighten. The stories had been true. Raiders were here. He counted at least 5 ships, moving slowly in formation. They made no sound except the low hum of their engines. The scouts hid among rocks, watching as the ships passed overhead. Their hulls were dark and scarred, marked by battles of the past. One of the scouts raised his flare to signal the colony, but Aaron stopped him. He whispered that they must wait. If the ships saw the light, they would know the scouts were near. The group stayed low, their breaths quiet. The ships moved on, heading toward the heart of the colony. Only when the last shadow vanished into the distance did Aaron nod for the flare. A red light shot into the sky, burning against the night. Back at the colony, alarms rang. The council ordered the walls manned, and settlers hurried to gather supplies. Nira stood ready with her people, her spear in hand, her eyes fixed on the horizon. When she saw the red flare, she knew Aaron was out there, guiding the scouts back through the night. Her heart pounded with worry. She had never admitted it, not even to herself, but the thought of losing him filled her with fear. The scouts returned. By dawn, their steps weary. Aaron walked at the front, dirt on his clothes, but no wound on his body. He told the council what they had seen. The raiders were near, and their numbers were not small. The colony had only days, perhaps hours, to prepare. Nira stood beside him as he spoke. She saw the way others listened to him, the way his calm voice steadied their fear. He was no warrior, yet people believed his words. She realized then that courage was not only in the strength of arms. It was in the heart that chose to face danger without running. That night, the colony did not sleep. Fires burned on the walls, weapons were sharpened, and plans were made. Aaron helped carry supplies, moving from one group to another, offering quiet words of encouragement. Nira joined the guards, her spear gleaming under the firelight. When their eyes met across the courtyard, a silent bond passed between them. They were no longer strangers forced together. They were two souls standing against the same shadow. Above them, the night sky glowed faintly with the lights of distant ships. The raiders were coming. The colony waited. And in the small house of pale stone, left empty for now, the silence carried a promise. Whatever storm was about to fall, Aaron and Nira would face it together. The colony woke to the sound of bells. The watchtowers had seen movement on the horizon. The raiders were no longer shadows in the sky. They were here. The suns had only just begun to rise, and already the air carried the sharp taste of fear. Men and women ran through the streets, gathering children, closing gates, and carrying weapons to the walls. Farmers left their fields, traders locked their stalls, and guards tightened their armor. The colony that had once been filled with calm, work now beat like a drum of war. Aaron stood among them, his face calm, though his heart pounded inside his chest. He had never fought in a battle, but he knew running would not save anyone. The colony was too far from other settlements. If they fell, no one would come to their aid. Nira stood tall beside him, her spear gleaming under the morning light. People had taken positions on the walls, their armor shining like steel fire. They were warriors, trained for moments like this, yet even they felt the weight of the enemy. For on the horizon, the raiders appeared. Dark ships hovered above the ground, lowering metal ramps. From them came armored figures, tall and heavy, carrying weapons that glowed with harsh light. They moved like predators, their lines tight and their steps steady. Their voices rose in harsh shouts that echoed across the plains. The colony wall shook with fear. Children cried, some settlers prayed under their breath. The council ordered silence, and the defenders gripped their weapons tighter. The first wave came fast. Raiders charged toward the gate, their boots pounding the earth. Arrows and bolts fired from the wall, striking some down, but many reached the gate and slammed heavy weapons against it. The wood groaned under the impact. Aaron felt the vibration through the ground as he stood with others near the gate. He held only a farming tool, a heavy iron bar shaped into a staff, yet he gripped it firmly. Nira shouted commands to her warriors. Her voice rang clear and strong. She moved with the grace of her people, striking down raiders who tried to climb the wall. Sparks flew as weapons clashed. The colony roared with the sound of battle. The gate finally burst open, splinters flying through the air. Raiders poured into the streets, shouting in their harsh tongue. Panic spread, but Aaron stepped forward. He shouted to the settlers to form a line, to hold the street together. His voice was steady, and though he was no soldier, people listened. Farmers, traders, and workers stood beside him, gripping whatever weapons they had. The raiders struck hard, but the settlers fought with desperate courage. Aaron swung his iron bar with all his strength, striking one raider to the ground. Pain jolted through his arms, but he did not stop. Another came, and he pushed the enemy back with the weight of his weapon. Around him, others followed his lead. The narrow street became a wall of human will. From the tower, Nira saw it. She saw Aaron standing where most would flee, his voice pulling others to fight beside him. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from something she had not felt before: pride. This man she had once seen as weak now stood as the heart of the colony's defense. The battle raged on. Smoke filled the air, and the scent of fire mixed with dust. Raiders set homes ablaze, their flames spreading through the streets. Cries of pain and anger rose, yet the colony did not fall. For every step the raiders took, settlers pushed them. back with stones, spears, and sheer determination. Aaron fought until his arms felt like lead. His chest burned, his body ached, yet he did not stop. He saw a group of children trapped near a burning wall, raiders closing in on them. Without thinking, he ran, striking down one raider with the last of his strength and pulling the children to safety. The settlers cheered, their spirits lifted by his courage. Nira leapt from the wall, landing beside him with her spear flashing like lightning. She struck down 2 raiders in a single motion, her armor glowing with the reflection of fire. Together, they stood, human and alien, back to back, facing the tide. The battle stretched into hours. The colony streets became rivers of smoke and struggle. Raiders pushed forward, then fell back, then charged again. Each time the settlers held their ground. Each time Aaron and Nira stood at the center, drawing others to fight harder. As the second sun began to sink, the raiders pulled back to their ships. Their leader shouted commands, and slowly the enemy retreated, leaving bodies and fire behind them. The colony walls still stood, though broken in places. The streets were scarred, but they had not fallen. Silence came, broken only by the crackle of flames. Survivors moved through the ruins, searching for loved ones, tending to the wounded. The council gathered to count the losses. Many had fallen, but many more lived because they had stood together. Aran sank to his knees, his body heavy with exhaustion. His hands shook, and blood ran down his arm from a shallow wound. Yet his eyes still burned with resolve. Nira knelt beside him, placing her hand on his shoulder. She looked at him not as a stranger, not as a human bound to her by duty, but as a warrior who had proven his strength. She whispered that he had saved more lives than even the strongest fighter. He looked up at her, weary but steady, and said that he only did what needed to be done. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the wall between them seemed to break. The colony did not celebrate that night. The fires were too fresh, the wounds too deep. Yet in the quiet shadows, as the stars rose above the broken plains, hope began to stir. For the first time, humans and aliens had stood together not as 2 peoples, but as one. And at the center of that unity were Aran and Nira, tested by fire, bound by survival, and stronger than they had ever been before. The colony did not rest after the battle. The raiders had retreated, but everyone knew they would return. Their first attack had been fierce, yet it felt more like a test than a full strike. The people understood that the real storm was still coming. Smoke still lingered over the plains. Homes lay broken, walls cracked, and the streets carried the scars of fire. Men and women worked through the night to repair what they could. Children helped carry stones and water. Every hand was needed, for the enemy could appear again at any moment. Aaron worked among them. His body ached from the last fight, his arms heavy, and his wounds still raw. Yet he lifted stones, repaired fences, and helped rebuild walls. His hands bled, but he did not stop. His calm voice guided others who struggled, reminding them that they were not alone. Nira watched him closely. She had seen him fight with courage, but now she saw something even stronger. His spirit did not fade even when his body was near collapse. He stood not only as a fighter, but as a pillar holding the colony together. For her, raised in a culture of warriors, this kind of strength was new. She began to feel the weight of her own pride, for she had judged him harshly before. The raiders did not give much time. On the 3rd day after the first attack, the watchtowers sounded the alarm again. More ships filled the horizon. This time their numbers were greater. Their engines roared across the plains, and the ground shook under their weight. The sky darkened with their shadows. The council gathered quickly. They spoke of retreat, but there was nowhere safe to run. The nearest settlement was weeks away. Some argued they should send out a surrender call. Nira's people refused. They had lived with honor too long to kneel before raiders. Aaron stood and spoke quietly but firmly. He said surrender would only bring slavery and death. He reminded them that they had survived the first strike together, and they could survive again. His words spread through the hall like fire. Settlers who moments before were afraid now clenched their fists with determination. When the raiders struck again, the battle was worse than before. Their weapons tore through the walls, sending stone crashing into the streets. Fire rained from the sky as their ships launched burning shells into homes. Screams filled the air. Chaos spread, but once again, Aaron's voice rose above the fear. He ordered people into groups, guiding them to defend the narrow streets where the raiders could not use their full strength. Nira fought at his side. Her spear flashed with deadly precision, striking down enemies that pressed too close. Yet even she, with all her skill, felt the tide turning against them. The raiders were too many. For everyone they defeated, two more appeared. Then came the moment that would change everything. Near the central square, a group of raiders broke through, aiming for the children who had been sheltered inside the hall. Nira ran to block them, but she was outnumbered. She fought with fury, cutting down several, but one struck her with a heavy blow to the side. Pain seared through her body as she fell to her knees. Aaron saw her fall. Without a second thought, he rushed forward. He had no armor, no great weapon, only the iron bar he had carried since the first attack. He swung with desperate strength, striking down one raider, then another. He stood over Nira, shielding her with his own body. The raiders pressed in. Blows struck Aaron's arms and shoulders, cutting his skin and breaking his breath. Still, he did not move. He planted his feet and stood like stone, refusing to let them pass. His voice roared louder than he thought possible, calling others to come. Settlers and warriors rushed to his side, answering his call. Together they drove the raiders back, forcing them to retreat from the hall. Nira lay against the wall, pain burning through her side. She looked up and saw Aaron above her, blood streaming from his wounds, his face pale yet unbroken. Her chest tightened. For the first time she felt fear not for herself, but for him. She realized then what she had been too proud to admit. This human, whom she had doubted and kept at a distance, had shown her a strength greater than any she had known. Not the strength of arms, but the strength of heart. The battle dragged on for hours. At last, the raiders pulled back again, their ships rising into the sky. The colony had survived, but the cost was heavy. Dozens were wounded, many had fallen, and the walls were nearly gone. The people walked through smoke and rubble, searching for survivors, carrying the injured to safety. Aaron could barely stand. His body was covered in cuts, his clothes torn and stained with blood. Yet he refused to rest until Nira was carried to the healers. Only then did he sink to the ground, his vision darkening. In the quiet room of the healers, Nira lay on a bed of cloth. Her wound was deep, but not fatal. She turned her head and saw Aaron lying nearby, his chest rising and falling with slow breaths. She reached for his hand, her fingers trembling. She whispered words she had never thought she would speak. She thanked him, not only for saving her, but for showing her what true strength meant. When Aaron opened his eyes, he saw her beside him. Pain lined his face, but his voice was steady. He said he could not have left her, just as he could not leave the colony. His duty was not only to survive, but to protect. Their eyes met, and in that silence, the distance between them seemed to vanish. Outside, the colony prepared for another night, uncertain of what tomorrow would bring. But within that small room, something unshakable had begun. Two lives, once bound only by duty, were now tied by choice. The breaking point had come, and instead of tearing them apart, it had drawn them closer. The battle had ended, but the night was quiet in a way that felt strange. The air smelled of smoke and wet earth, and the stars shone brightly above the plains. The colony still bore the scars of war. Walls were broken, homes were burned, and the streets carried rubble from the attacks. Yet amidst the destruction, a sense of relief settled over the survivors. They had survived, and that alone was a triumph. In their house on the edge of the plains, Aaron and Nira sat together for the first time since the battle. The room was quiet, the soft light of the fire flickering on the stone walls. Aaron's clothes were torn, and dirt marked his skin, but his posture was calm. Nira sat across from him, her wound bandaged and her hands resting lightly on her knees. She had not spoken much, but her eyes lingered on him with a new understanding. The night was theirs alone, and for the first time, silence was not a wall between them. Aaron broke the quiet first. He spoke softly about the colony, about the work that still needed to be done, and about the people who had fought bravely. His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that made Nira listen carefully. She responded, quietly, sharing her thoughts about the battle. She admitted that she had underestimated humans. She spoke of fear, of anger, and of the pride she had carried for so long. Aaron listened without judgment. His eyes never left hers, and his calm presence seemed to ease the tension in her chest. For a long moment, neither spoke. They sat side by side, looking at the fire and listening to the wind outside. Then Nira took a deep breath and began to speak in a voice that was almost a whisper. She told Aaron that she had not believed humans could be strong in the ways that mattered most. Her people measured strength in battle and in power, yet here was a human who had stood firm when all else seemed lost. He had protected the colony not because he sought glory, but because he understood responsibility. Aaron nodded, understanding her words more deeply than she knew. He spoke of his own doubts, of the fear he had felt when the raiders first appeared. He admitted that he had worried about losing the colony, about failing those who depended on him. Yet he had acted because he believed that courage was measured not by strength alone, but by willingness to stand when others could not. Nira listened, and slowly, her pride began to soften. She realized that she had been judging him by the standards of her own people without seeing the courage that lay within his calm heart. For the first time, she allowed herself to see him as more than a human, more than a partner by duty. She saw him as an equal, a companion, and perhaps something even greater. The firelight danced across their faces, and for the first time, Nira smiled. It was small, careful, and uncertain, but it reached her eyes. Aaron returned the smile, a quiet expression of relief and understanding. They did not speak for a long while, allowing the moment to grow between them. The night seemed to stretch endlessly, giving them time to reflect and to feel without fear. Finally, Nira spoke again. She admitted that she had resisted the Union at first. She had believed that humans could never match the honor and strength of her people. She had been proud and distant, unwilling to show trust or respect. But the events of the past days had changed her. She had seen Aaron act with courage, patience, and wisdom. She had seen him fight for others without seeking reward. She realized that he possessed a strength that was rare and powerful, a strength that came from the heart rather than the sword. Aaron listened, his expression calm but full of understanding. He said that he never sought to prove himself to her. His goal had always been to protect the colony and to live by the principles he believed in. He had acted out of care and responsibility, not to impress or to gain favor. His words were honest, and Nira could feel their truth in every syllable. The conversation grew deeper as the night continued. They spoke of their pasts, of the lives they had lived before the Union. Aaron shared stories of the plains, of the work he had done, and of the dreams he held for the colony. Nira shared stories of her people, of training, battles, and the values that had shaped her. Each story revealed a side of the other that had been hidden, building understanding and connection. At one point, Nira reached out and touched Aaron's hand. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried meaning beyond words. He took her hand in return, holding it gently, letting her feel the steady warmth of his presence. The silence that followed was comfortable, filled with trust and a shared understanding that had not existed before. The night grew late, and the fire burned low. Yet neither moved to leave the warmth of the room. They continued to talk, to share, and to reflect. By the time the first light of dawn touched the plains, something profound had shifted between them. The walls of pride and distance that had separated them for so long had begun to crumble. Nira finally spoke the words she had been hesitant to say. She admitted that she trusted him, not because duty demanded it, but because she chose to. She recognized the strength in his heart and the courage in his actions. She said that she wanted to stand beside him, not as a bride forced into a union, but as a partner, equal and respected. Aaron's eyes softened. He said that he had always hoped for this, but he had never rushed her. He explained that trust and respect were earned, and now he saw that she had chosen both willingly. Their hands remained joined, and for the first time a sense of peace settled over them. Outside, the colony stirred. People began to repair walls, clean streets, and rebuild what had been damaged. The air carried the promise of a new day, a day filled with hope and determination. Inside their home, Aaron and Nira looked at each other with quiet joy, understanding that they had crossed a threshold together. The night of truth had changed everything. It had broken the silence and fear that had kept them apart. It had replaced doubt with trust, pride with understanding, and distance with connection. They had faced the storm, and in its aftermath, they had found one another. As the suns rose, higher in the sky, Aaron and Nira stepped outside together. The plains stretched before them, filled with the light of a new day. They walked side by side, not as strangers, not as partners by duty, but as companions who had chosen to trust and stand with each other. The colony watched them, and a quiet hope grew among the people. The events of the past nights had forged a bond stronger than fear, stronger than pride, and stronger than any doubt. Aaron and Nira had discovered a truth more powerful than any: battle, the strength of the heart, and the choice to stand together. The plains were quiet again, but this quiet was different from before. It was no longer tense with fear. The fires from the raiders' attack had been extinguished, the walls partially repaired, and the colony had begun to rebuild itself stronger than before. People moved with purpose, carrying stones, tending crops, and clearing streets. A sense of hope had returned, stronger than ever. Aaron and Nira walked together through the colony. Their steps were measured, not hurried, and their eyes watched the work around them. Settlers greeted them, their voices filled with gratitude. Children ran past, laughing, carrying small tools to help in the reconstruction. Every smile, every nod, reminded them of what they had fought to protect. Nira noticed how the people worked together. Humans and her people moved side by side, sharing skills and strength. Walls were rebuilt faster, crops replanted, and homes restored. She felt a warmth in her chest as she realized that the colony had survived not because of a single fighter or warrior, but because they had united. She looked at Aaron, and he smiled, understanding exactly what she felt. They stopped, near the central square where the largest damage had been done. The fire had destroyed the market stalls, leaving only scorched beams and blackened earth. Aaron knelt and examined the ground. He touched the soil and felt the energy of the earth beneath his hands. He imagined the market bustling again, filled with merchants, laughter, and life. Nira knelt beside him, her hands brushing over the dirt. She thought of her people, their long tradition of building strength through effort, and she realized that humans had a strength that matched her own, a quiet power that grew from care and persistence. "Do you see it?" Aaron asked, his voice soft but steady. Even after everything, life will return. The colony will grow stronger because of what we endured. Nira nodded. Yes, and it will be because people stood together, even when it seemed impossible. That is strength worth more than any weapon. The days passed quickly. Rebuilding became their purpose. Aaron organized groups of settlers, assigning work based on skills and strength. Nira trained the young warriors, teaching them precision and control rather than just force. Together they found balance. Human ingenuity and alien discipline worked side by side, creating a community that was stronger than any single part of it. During these days, Aaron and Nira also found moments for each other. They shared meals in the quiet of their home, walked along the edge of the plains to watch the twin suns set, and spoke of dreams for the future. The trust between them had grown into a deep understanding. No longer was their relationship bound by duty alone. It had become a choice, a partnership built on respect and shared experience. One evening, as the suns sank low and the sky glowed with shades of orange and purple, they stood on a hill overlooking the colony. Smoke still rose faintly from repaired homes, and the laughter of children echoed from the fields. The settlers had learned to smile again, to work together, and to celebrate the life they had fought to keep. Nira turned to Aaron. "Do you think we can protect it all?" she asked quietly. Aaron looked at her, his expression calm but determined. "We will. Not because we fight alone, but because we stand together. The colony is not just walls or weapons. It is the people who care for it, who protect it, and who grow with it. That is what makes it strong." She nodded, feeling the truth of his words. For the first time, she felt completely at home, not in the walls or the stones, but in the presence of someone who shared her purpose and who valued life. As she now valued it, days turned into weeks, and the colony slowly returned to its former rhythm, now stronger and more united. Farmers worked the fields with renewed energy, traders reopened their markets, and guards patrolled with confidence. People moved with a sense of pride, knowing they had survived a challenge that could have destroyed them. Aaron and Nira became symbols of that hope. People looked to them not as leaders because of rank or power, but because of their courage, compassion, and commitment to others. Their partnership inspired both humans and aliens to set aside past prejudices, to trust, and to work together for a shared future. One morning, the council gathered in the central hall. They discussed new plans for defense, trade, and education. Aaron spoke of teaching settlers practical skills to protect themselves, and Nira shared strategies for discipline and training. The council agreed to implement their ideas, seeing that the combination of human ingenuity and alien strength was the best way forward. As the meeting ended, Aaron and Nira stepped outside together. The sun bathed the plains in gold, and the air smelled of fresh earth and growing crops. Children played nearby, their laughter rising like music. Settlers carried tools and baskets, working in harmony with each other. The colony was alive, not just in survival, but in spirit. Nira looked at Aaron and spoke softly. "We have come far, not only for the colony, but for ourselves." Aaron took her hand, his grip firm and gentle. "Yes, we have learned that strength is not only in battle or in pride. It is in standing together, in protecting what is important, and in trusting each other." She smiled, feeling a peace she had never known before. "Then let us continue, side by side, for the future we can build together." The wind blew across the plains, carrying the scent of new beginnings. Aaron and Nira walked back to the heart of the colony, side by side, ready to face whatever came next. Together, they were no longer simply human and alien. They were companions, leaders, and protectors of a home that had survived against all odds. The colony thrived in the days that followed. Each challenge became an opportunity to grow stronger, and each setback was met with courage. Aaron and Nira continued to guide the settlers, teaching them that unity was their greatest weapon and compassion was their greatest strength. And as the twin suns rose each morning, their light reflected on the plains, the walls, and the people, reminding everyone that even after fire, fear, and doubt, life could be rebuilt stronger than before. Aaron and Nira stood at the edge of the plains one evening, watching the sun sink below the horizon. They did not need words to understand each other. The trials they had faced had forged a bond deeper than pride or fear, a bond of trust, courage, and shared purpose. Together, they had found not only survival, but hope, love, and the strength to shape a future worth protecting.